Hi, my name is Rick Brimacombe, and on behalf of the Minneapolis Club and my firm, Brimacombe and Associates, welcome to Club Entrepreneur. This is my 11th season doing Club E, and I've helped thousands of you makers and creators do your thing. While I've been doing venture capital deals for over 20 years, my job, or as Darren Lynch and I talk about it, my personal why, is to inspire all of you to do things you didn't think possible. Back in 2007, when I started Club E, the iPhone was just being introduced. Today, we're going to hear from Andrew Murphy of Loop Ventures as he discusses his venture firm's vision for the future of technology. But before we get to Andrew's talk, Pursuing the Future Perfect, I want to thank our sponsors. Schwegman, Lumberg, Woosner is an intellectual property law firm. They've been a sponsor since 2007, the early days. Olson Thielen CPAs is a full-service accounting firm. It's been a sponsor since 2009, and I have Mike Bromelkamp to my left, sitting over here. Irish Titan, Darren Lynch in the middle there, who will be doing our introduction in a moment. Darren is the CEO and founder of Irish Titan Web Development and E-commerce Company. They've been sponsor now for 4 years. Sunbelt Business Brokers is an M&A advisory firm. They've been a sponsor for 2 years. McLeod and Company, which is a holistic marketing agency. I have a couple of folks. Allison Waz, where's Allison? Right there in the middle. And Sam Stender, where's Sam? In the back over there. Thank you, you two, for both sponsoring as well as helping with the marketing of Club Entrepreneur. I appreciate that. Highland Bank is a new sponsor, a local family-owned community bank. I have a couple of folks from Highland here. I have Melissa Johnson right up in front. And Rick Wall is somewhere, because I saw him. He's back there. And then, I don't know if we have anybody else from Highland here. One there. Oh, yeah, one there in the middle. So anyway, thank you all for your support and sponsorship. And then the Network Connect is a catalytic gateway for connecting investors, companies, and service providers. And I do that organization with Dick Summerstead. Anyway, please support these sponsors, as they are the ones that make the events possible. So to the extent you can, if you need their services, I've worked with all of them personally and can vouch for not only the work they do, but also the fun that they've added to my life and the enjoyment I've had with the relationships with those folks. So again, support them if you can. Please RSVP online with Brown Paper Ticket. As a reminder, it's the first Thursday of the month, 11:15 start. As far as connecting with Club Entrepreneur, there's the website, clube.com. These cards are on your table, and you can sign up for a newsletter there. We have videos, events, and a business directory that you can engage with and sign up for. LinkedIn group, Club Entrepreneur-Minneapolis. Is out there and one that you can join and connect up with the folks who are here. There's actually over 2,500 people in that group. I've had a couple people, new people here today. Welcome. They came through Meetup. There's over 1,700 people in our Meetup group. There's an email list that I can add you to if you would like. And then last but not least, I've been doing this from day one with the Minneapolis Club. And they've been a wonderful sponsor of mine, as well as a great part of my life, both personally and professionally. If anybody'd like to learn more about the Minneapolis Club, please let me know. Future events, there's a little sheet of paper on the table that has upcoming events. But quickly, November 14th, Club E Hudson has a panel talking about underperforming owners, and I know none of you would fall into that camp, but in the event that you work for an underperforming owner and you want to see how you might be able to change them, that is November 14th in Hudson. November 15th, Club E St. Paul, Know Yourself, Improve Your Business. Chum Struby's here somewhere. Where's Chum? Right there in the middle. They are talking about the Enneagram, and does anybody know what the Enneagram is? Got 1, 2... We did that at one of my workplaces a number of years back. I think it's amazing. Helps categorize people and facilitates actually better relationships, especially on the work front with people, how they work styles. So I've used that a number of times. So if you're interested in that, that's November 15th in St. Paul. November 28th, Club E and Upsize are doing kind of a best practices, lessons learned conversation. And panel, that is again November 28th, and then next time back here for Club E Minneapolis is December 7th. Club E Minneapolis will have, if you can't beat them, join them. National speaker and business builder utilizing Amazon. So tie that into the holiday season and online retailing and so forth. So if you want to learn how to better sell your wares online, for sure come to the December 7th meeting right here. Okay, so that leads us to today's speaker. And Darren, why don't you come on up? Andrew Murphy, Pursuing the Future Perfect, is going to be our conversation. As I mentioned, Darren Lynch and Irish Titan is one of the sponsors of Club E, and since Darren is my go-to technology guru, I'm going to turn it over to him and have him introduce Andrew. Thanks,
Rick. Yeah, right. It's in advance for me to leave. So not sure if I'm a technology guru, but thank you for that. I think people outside of technology lump us all together. It's like how people aren't in finance might think a controller, CFO, and accountant are all kind of the same thing. So as Rick mentioned, I'm Darren Lynch, the founder and CEO of Irish Titan. Much to the dismay of many people in here, many of you already know me, so I'll keep this brief. It's not about us, but Irish Titan's a digital agency located here in town. We have 40 exactly employees today. We build e-commerce sites, we build complex websites, and then we do digital marketing and strategy around that. So we build the things and then work with our clients on an ongoing basis. We're closed 2 days a year, St. Patrick's Day and the day after. That always gets a laugh, although it's also true. And our why that Rick and I talk about a lot, with the start with why, Simon Sinek sort of model, is business first, online second. So if you remember nothing else, remember that about us. So I'm here to introduce Andrew. As Rick mentioned, we probably share some technology bits and bytes sort of mindset in common. He's going to talk about the next iteration and where technology is going from Loop Ventures perspective, VR, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence. And I can firsthand testify to that. A year ago when we expanded our office space, the architect had me put on a virtual reality, or maybe that would be augmented reality. You can clarify if I'm right or wrong. And virtually walked me through the layout of the new office. And then just a few weeks ago, a different friend of mine brought some equipment in and did a virtual reality demo that was incredible. Felt like we were in outer space, standing in our office, shooting asteroids. So it's definitely on its way. So let's welcome Andrew.
Hey, Andrew Murphy, Loop Ventures, and thanks so much, Rick and Darren, for having me, introducing me. Loop is an early stage venture capital fund here in town that is brand new. So club entrepreneur, I guess I feel more like an entrepreneur than you might think myself after starting the fund and kind of jumping off a bridge from a cushy job that I felt would have lasted a long time to do something I felt I was passionate about with two guys that I worked with at Piper Jaffray, Gene Munster and Doug Clinton. So the three of us started Loop in January. We've been doing three things, as I describe it, since then. Raising a fund ourselves, as many of you and entrepreneurs know that fundraising is part of the job, and I know the pains and also the excitement and fun and benefit of that role. Secondly, we've been investing. So we invest in early stage tech startups. I would say broadly kind of frontier technology companies. And I'll get into more about what that means. That's actually kind of the whole thing here today. And the third thing that we've been doing that's a little unique is the research. So I would call our fund a research-driven fund, partly because that's what we do as analysts. We wrote research on tech companies, publicly traded tech companies. And as venture capitalists, we've continued to write research on those companies, actually, because of the impact that they have in making these emerging technologies a reality, but also in the themes and the startups that we're pursuing. So that's Loop Ventures, a little bit about me. And again, thanks for having me here. Rick, I believe in the why. that you stated around just motivating and inspiring people to do things that they never thought they could do. I feel like a little bit I'm doing that myself, or at least on that journey. And so it's fun to be part of a room of people that are also doing that. See here. So the big picture on Loop and sort of why we started this. We are pursuing 4 themes that we think are going to be critical in kind of creating the next big wave in tech: artificial intelligence, robotics, virtual reality, and augmented reality. So on the left side, you see automation, right? And what I would call kind of the future of work, core technologies that are going to bring about a complete transformation in the way we do our work. And we'll talk more about each of these themes as we go here. On the right side, virtual reality, and kind of a new way to experience our information. I think today it's primarily computers, smartphones, and we see those being replaced by more immersive technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality to create new computing experiences that I think will be transformational because of the way that we interact with information, right? As simple as reading an email, right, is going to be different when these devices and these technologies begin to permeate society. So we started Loop Ventures because we see the next big wave coming. And if you look at this slide, you'll see the first 10 years of the major technology shifts over the last half century. You see PCs as sort of the line along the bottom. Actually amazing how long it took PCs to gather a large user base, which is the y-axis there. Smartphone and internet technologies grew faster, and you see these technologies build on the ones that came before them. They also build faster. And we see this next big wave being created by especially augmented reality, virtual reality type experiences. And so we raised a venture fund to go invest in these technologies. But as the waves get bigger and faster, technology itself moves faster. And so we think that we're going to see 10 years of innovation, 30 years of innovation in the next 10 years. The example, I guess, would be if you took somebody from 1800 and plopped them into 1900, I think that those 100 years would have been, there would have been some surprises, some changes. But I think if you took somebody from 1900 and plopped them into 2000, there'd be far more shock, transformation, right? And that's just because of the speed of technology. I think that from 2000 to 2017, we've even seen more transformation than potentially we did in the last 100 years before it. And the next 10 years are going to be even more transformational. So the speed, and I think some of the things I might say today may sound totally crazy, but because of the accelerating pace of technology, I think it's more possible or plausible than you might think. But happy to engage in the debate, and if some of this is wrong, then I've probably done my job right, because I think when you're predicting the future and you don't sound a little crazy, then you're probably way off. But we'll start with artificial intelligence, and what I'm going to do is, in the next 20, 30 minutes, rip through those 4 themes and try to give you kind of a primer on those 4 themes and how I think they're going to impact the world as they emerge. So we'll start with artificial intelligence and give you a bit of a history. It's actually 60 plus years old, a term that was coined at Dartmouth, and it took a long time for example, IBM's Watson to win Jeopardy, and today there's all sorts of artificial intelligence permeating our daily lives, right? Like Alexa, for example. But in the future, self-driving cars will leverage this technology, and those are some of the big trends that I would say artificial intelligence will be leveraged for. 3 types of artificial intelligence. One is artificial narrow intelligence. In fact, that would probably be the kind of AI that was used for the Go competition, for the computer to beat Go or beat the human player in Go or chess. The bottom line is ANI is the ability for a machine to do a very specific task very well. It's the simplest, easiest, and something that we've already accomplished. Down the road, though, and because of processing power and the data that you capture in artificial narrow intelligence, you're able to build artificial general intelligence, which would be equivalent to a human's intelligence. The ability to reason, anticipate, empathize even. And we're not there yet, but I think we will be soon. Artificial superintelligence is better than human level intelligence, where it's a new level of abstract reasoning and intelligence levels that we can't accomplish ourselves and may not even be able to understand. Example being, chimp walks into this building and may be able to walk through the door, hop up in a chair, sit down, but would have no concept of how this building was created. In fact, would have no concept that this is a human-designed and built building. With artificial superintelligence, we're the chimps. And there's a level of intelligence that we don't understand and that machines, function and operate above and beyond us. So where are we today? I think most scientists, practitioners of AI, which I'm not, would say we're at about the level of a worm. And it will take 30 or 15, 20 years to achieve general intelligence and even more to achieve superintelligence, which is sort of that tripwire. And the tripwire for superintelligence, well, let me say, first, the tripwire for superintelligence is what sort of brings on some of the risks, I think, that people think about when they talk about artificial intelligence. And, Elon Musk has warned that it could mean the end of the world and machines taking over and all of that. Talk a little bit about that later. But superintelligence is what would enable that type of machine-level superiority to humans. But we like to say that we're investing with the giants. And we did a scan of the S&P 500 companies and their earnings reports and found that 10% of them mentioned artificial intelligence in the most recent quarterly earnings call. So this theme is one that is permeating the best and largest, biggest companies in a very broad sense, right, across the entire S&P 500. Or we like to say, just as every company was and has become an internet company today, we think that in the future, every company will be an AI company. Even grocery websites, or grocery stores have websites and grocery delivery services, right? For us to kind of look back 50 years and see how every business has become an internet business is sort of the corollary, I think, to where we're headed in the future, where every business will need to, in some ways, incorporate artificial intelligence to compete because their competitors will be using it. So how do we use it today? Google's developed technology, for example, that allows you to search with your camera. And given what's coming into the lens, it can tell you, and you may see this all the time in tools that you use on your phone today, if it's a receipt, it can identify if it's a flower or a certain restaurant. But Google has this Google Lens technology that allows artificial intelligence to identify what an image is based on various characteristics and a massive data set of photos that they have. Alexa, good example of a very simple use case of artificial intelligence. And And then thinking more into the future, imagine a textbook that adapted itself as you learned along with it. So chapter 2 was different than chapter 1, not only in content, but in style and approach based on the learner. So it allows for, or a movie or a TV series that adapts as the viewer watches it, because the entertainment source can identify how a viewer is responding to that, I don't know, episode 1, and could adapt as it goes by using data to anticipate what the viewer would enjoy more in episode 2. That's a couple AI. And I think that because of what's needed for AI, primarily a big data set from lots of users, the usual suspects are going to be the winners in AI. It's sort of a boring conclusion to, I think, a big topic, but I think it's true that these usual suspects will be winners in AI because of the data sets that they have. Who will be disrupted? Professional services like document review, right? If that can just be automated, it's pretty simple. Support roles through chatbots and things like that. I think we're going to see more robots that can do more things, and we'll talk. But ultimately, like I said, every company becomes an AI company, and so everything will be disrupted in some way by more efficient, better decision making that is enabled by artificial intelligence and these great data sets that we've built over the last 10 years because of the internet. There are huge risks to this, like I was kind of hinting at with the tripwire of superintelligence and whether or not the robots are going to take over and destroy the world. That's sort of a debate that Elon Musk, for example, has warned of. Mark Zuckerberg has sort of been publicly on the other side of that debate, and we fall more in the camp that would say, if you look back at technology from the advent of fire, or think of a very primal technology, there's risks involved in every technology. And technology itself is not deterministic. I think it's up to the creators and the users of a technology to decide whether or not it's used for good or bad. And we've, so far, policed that as a society, and I kind of see AI as the same thing. All right, theme number 2 that we're involved in, and I think this is enabled by AI. We'll talk more about this, but if artificial intelligence is the brains behind the future of work, robotics is the brawn behind the future of work, where machinery and power are involved, physical power. This is the first industrial robot, I think was in a car manufacturing facility in the 60s. And we've had some breakthroughs since then. Lower cost sensors. Think of your camera and all of the probably dozens of sensors that it has to gather information about you and your surroundings. One of them, the camera, coupled with additional advancements in computing power and just Moore's law in general, has enabled computer vision. Like I was saying, Google Lens's technology to identify what an object is as it looks through the camera. And then artificial intelligence itself is leveraged for robotics. All of these breakthroughs are enabling robots to do new things in our lives, and for us to use robots in new ways. We think that robotic, and sorry for the x-axis there, this was transferred to PowerPoint at the last minute so I could get it on this computer. But robotic units are going to go vertical, right? And the millions of units sold from today, essentially less than 10 million a year, is going to more than triple over the next 10 years. And there are some things, though, that the robots can't do. We like to say empathy, creativity, and community are 3 things that, for example, I work on with my kids, because I think if I think about mathematics, which I think is an important core skill for them to have, I don't see it as core or uniquely human, or defensible, I guess is one way to think of it, as these three things. And I think that there are businesses, Dave, your cabinetry business, for example, has a ton of creativity in it that is going to be a dispensable piece of your business against more automatic or efficient ways of creating hardware for our house, right? The artwork, the story behind it, the craft and the culture, I think are things that are protected against this sort of automation age that we see coming. However, if you're a truck driver, as this map shows, is the most popular occupation in something like 42 of the 50 states, there is a concern that advancements in robotics and electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles will seriously disrupt the economy and the labor market for this very reason. Now, today, this is an example of a cobot, which is a robot that can be used alongside of or even by a human, essentially making this woman a super manufacturer, right? Where her skills are augmented by the robot's obvious skills with precision, accuracy, efficiency. And cobots are a good example of the way robotic technology is being used to augment our human efficiency and capability. Sorry, if this goes red, I'm still good. Another example of a robot here is this is a ground robot that you could envision a drone, which I think is next, carrying a package to your doorstep. However, let's say you live in an apartment building. This ground robot could have the ability to then deliver, in fact, I've even seen a robot like that can open doors, and it basically stands up on its hind legs, so to speak, and can open a door given a certain type of tool. That would then allow the package to be delivered up into your bedroom or your living room, all automatically. And so, you start to get a glimpse as you look at these examples of how robots will affect our lives. I mentioned autonomous vehicles. Tesla, we think, is going to be a winner in this space. And they are not just a car company. In fact, I would say they're more of an AI and robotics company. And also, they're on a mission to accelerate the transition to renewable energy. So all of that comes together, and you start to see how these technologies impact the future of our lives. And today, 1% of vehicles are electric. In 30 years or in 15 years, we think a third of the vehicles sold will be electric, and that enables the automation. I think electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles are going to be the most impactful subsegment of robotics, and something that is good to be aware of, and something that we want to capture as investors. It'll be eventually, we think that it'll be illegal for a human to drive, just as it's illegal to ride a horse and buggy on a street today, unless you're specially licensed for carriage rides up and down Nicollet Mall. It's the similar type of transformation we're talking about here with autonomous vehicles or self-driving vehicles. And I think it's coming sooner than you think because of the advancements we're seeing in robotics. So who gets disrupted? Obviously, auto parts stores. I think there's something like 20 or 30 moving parts in a Tesla Model S versus over 2,000 in a typical combustion engine vehicle. You just don't need to replace as many parts on your car. There's a problem here for auto parts manufacturers and that space in general. I think the oil industry broadly gets disrupted. The insurance agents, the insurance industry needs to change, and we talk to companies that are designing insurance platforms for the autonomous vehicle age. It's really fascinating because The liability goes, away from the driver and towards the manufacturer of the vehicle. What else? Uber, even a company as new and innovative as Uber, in fact, is leading the charge on self-driving cars because they know that if they don't, they'll be replaced by fleets and self-driving cars when we no longer need human drivers, which is their competitive moat today. This is a parking lot, which goes away in sense of a robotic or autonomous vehicle. You don't need to park it all day because it would be out being used for other purposes. And I think even just owning a car will be less likely in 30 years. In fact, I think we'll need to figure out how to use parking lots as alternative types of spaces. And there's some really cool architectural firms that are showing how we can use the infrastructure that's built for all these cars that are sitting parked all day long, and how, when that doesn't happen, how we could use that space. Taco Bell, if you're self-driving, if you're in a self-driving car, you're going to be less likely to stop for an Mpls taco. And there's all sorts of disruption that comes from robotics and that space that we see. So the next set of themes is the augmented reality and virtual reality piece that I wanted to talk about, which we think of as the future of computing and sort of the replacement of the smartphone. Augmented reality comes first in our minds, even though both technologies exist today. The phone is sort of the lens through which we see augmented reality, which is literally a digital or virtual layer superimposed on reality to augment reality in some way. So Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, has said AR is one of those things that we'll look back on and marvel at. They're investing billions in augmented reality. And again, we're trying to invest alongside the giants in the types of technologies that they are also investing in. Here's some examples: Snapchat filters that overlay digital ears and nose on this guy's face to make him look like a dog. Pokemon, somebody told me this morning that Pokemon is the largest media franchise in history and beats Star Wars by something like $13 billion. Amazing. I think it's partially driven by just the global reach, but also the spending power of younger people, and good reminder of the types of properties that are driving value. One of them is this game, Pokemon Go, which essentially puts digital characters out in the real world, and you can only see the digital character through augmented reality, through the lens of your phone. So that's augmented reality. Today, right, I've talked about computers, keyboards, and mice, and the smartphone, but I think the future is more about interacting with computers through our voice and our gestures, and even our thoughts, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Augmented reality, if you go back, a good example that we all know is the 1st and 10 line, the yellow marker, when that was introduced into, I think, Fox telecast of football games. It's a good example of augmented reality and how it can be used to show and augment real life to provide incremental and valuable information. In 2014, Google did a product called Google Glass, which would show digital information through your glasses. And it was essentially a flop, I think partially because it's before its time, but they also kind of went a consumer route with it, where they should have, and now they are going back and doing a much more commercial route with it, and I'll show you a picture of that. Talked about Pokemon Go and Snapchat were particularly popular last year when phones were able to augment reality in this new way. But this year, Apple and Google got really serious about augmented reality with ARKit and ARCore. Those are just developer tools so that people can use these technologies, and they're going to be in our pockets. Well, they are already in millions of people's pockets that own anything from an iPhone 6 or later, anything from any of Google's phones or Samsung's phones, from recent years. They're all tools for augmented reality. But the phone is sort of this limited lens through which we can see. And I think more immersive computing platforms like glasses would be much more natural for augmented reality to be a day-to-day computing paradigm that I would use. So units will go vertical again because of, I think Apple will engage in this space and do some sort of an AR product that's outside of the phone and provide digital information through a lens or on the lenses themselves so that I'm seeing that information overlaid on reality. Use cases today, I talked about Snapchat's filters and Pokemon Go, but it gets much more serious when you think about the impact that it could have on training. Essentially take any high-risk scenario and make it virtual with augmented reality. We've looked at a couple different companies that are using AR and VR for training, and it basically de-risks any high-test situation. Think of flying a fighter jet, or I mean, even welcoming a guest at Walmart and being able to practice that virtually instead of having to do it in a higher risk or like a fake scenario. Training, I think, will be a big part of that. This I don't know if you can tell on the screen, but we think that local services will be impacted by essentially being able to quickly and virtually do something like a bid on a kitchen remodel by measuring and capturing information much more quickly, much more efficiently, and without having to roll a truck to the site, which is 3/4 of the time spent. Design will be disrupted. I think today IKEA has a product that allows you to see what your office space would look like with its furniture in your office space if you look through the lens of an iPad here in this example. But it's a great example of augmented reality, and I think that will be a de facto way to essentially predict the future or see the future without any cost. Imagine building a hospital and being able to allow a surgeon to experience the emergency room before it's built so that they can say, oh, this light needs to be moved over here. I need quicker access to this table. Bring that over here. In a virtual environment, you can do that at no cost instead of building the hospital and then spending another $1 million to remodel the hospital because the tables weren't close enough or the lights are in the wrong place. AR and VR, I think, allow us to increase our efficiency and save tons of costs. So there's value proposition that's pretty clear there. Who wins in AR? Google, I talked about their glass project. Here's an example where this guy's probably getting instructions on how to repair this or what comes next or what part he needs to put in, what screw number he needs. There's all sorts of commercial application for augmented reality, and Google's on the forefront of this, spending billions or at least hundreds of millions a year to stay in front of them. I mentioned Apple's AR kit that will, I think, keep them. Their also competitive advantage is the fact that, again, we all have their phones in our pockets, which is the best AR tool today. And eventually, they will need to go beyond the phone to stay sort of in a leadership position in augmented reality. But their base of developers that can create these experiences is going to be hugely helpful in kind of maintaining their leadership. There's a company called Magic Leap, has raised over $100 million. I think they're in Florida, and they have some very secretive technology that we think will be transformational in the augmented reality space to create virtual objects in ways that seem very realistic. Unlike that picture, which isn't a very good one. There's a better one where there's a bunch of kids sitting around a gymnasium. It's just like this room, and out of the floor is coming this big killer whale, and you see them all react because they're all using the same glasses to see the same thing from different vantage points. But there's education is another space that, where you can learn, see, and experience something up close that you never could otherwise without these types of virtual tools. Developers will be winners. And I think that anybody that's on the forefront of creating new digital experiences is going to have a good business going forward. I've mentioned a few times, I think augmented reality eventually replaces the smartphone. So the smartphone itself gets disrupted by augmented reality and virtual reality, which is the last theme that we're investing in. And whereas augmented reality is kind of a semi-virtual, semi-real experience, virtual reality is a fully immersive experience where the user is 100% in a virtual environment. And those two things kind of exist on a spectrum, but virtual reality would be the end of that spectrum where it's fully immersive, and it allows for different types of experiences. But Nintendo announced a virtual product early in the 90s, way before its time. Facebook acquired Oculus in 2014, and Google announced a much lower cost way to experience virtual reality with a smartphone as the display called Daydream in 2016. So VR costs are coming down, and they've figured out ways to use our smartphones to experience virtual reality as the display. But there's dedicated virtual reality headsets that are much better and create much better experiences. Here's our kind of curve on that. I think that this is going to be a smaller user base because the headsets are expensive, but as they come down in cost, virtual reality units will begin to, again, permeate our society. So how do we use it today? This is an example of a woman. What you're seeing is the woman playing a VR game where she is Darth Vader, and you also see what she's seeing as Darth Vader and, I guess, playing with her lightsaber. So she's playing a video game, which I think is a primary use case for virtual reality. If you've had the chance to play a VR game with HTC Vive equipment, it's mind-blowing, and you'd never want to play video games any other way after trying it out. Teleportation, I think, is in some ways finally achievable, because in virtual environments that are imperceptible from reality or such high quality that you wouldn't say you experience it as if, in this case, you're in San Francisco and this guy's larger than life. But the idea is that you can be anywhere. Think of virtual meetings or any type of physical experience that is imperceptible from reality. All of a sudden, distance and location are less important. Real estate. We actually invested in a company that creates virtual walkthroughs of real estate properties that are for sale. And it's much better than the typical slideshow that you might see on a real estate website, or even looking at an apartment on Craigslist. You slide through a slideshow of pictures. But imagine being able to virtually walk through the property as you're exploring and considering a purchase. It's much more rich and realistic. So real estate, there's an easy application there. Education, I've talked about a little bit. And therapy, this is a company we talked to recently that's using augmented reality and virtual reality as therapy tools to either distract patients while some other procedure is going on, or to expose them to something that may help calm them or make life easier for them in the hospital. Bunch of applications, I think, for VR and AR to make life easier for hospital patients. Sorry. And training I've talked about before. This is a company that uses virtual reality. In fact, the Vikings are a customer to train quarterbacks on the types of defensive situations they might encounter during the game to help practice and prepare for different possibilities. And the Vikings love it, by the way. Who's going to win in VR? I've mentioned HTC Vive, I think, is a leading headset and hardware play in VR. Oculus is Facebook. They're dumping too much money into it for them not to be kind of in a pole position there. And then also Google, I mentioned, this is kind of this low-cost VR headset that allows people to use their smartphone as the display for a VR experience. I mentioned the disruption that could happen in the travel space because business travel is less important when you can virtually be in a location with a client or a partner. Big screen TVs. After playing a video game in VR, I would never want to play an Xbox on my TV again because you're in the TV, it feels like, right? There's no border, there's no limit, and gaming on a big screen just doesn't do the trick anymore. And so I think gaming and even just the idea of watching TV will change as these more immersive technologies proliferate. Live events like watching a basketball game. You see the NBA and Major League Baseball, NFL to a lesser degree, but they're pushing the envelope on what you can do in VR because they know that the experience is going to be so great. It will be similar to a live event, experiencing it courtside, for example, where instead of the lucky few that can sit courtside at a basketball game, all of a sudden anybody that wants to play or wants to pay can watch a basketball game courtside, or even from the player's vantage point. So the last interface or modality that I wanted to mention, I mentioned the future interfaces of voice and gestures, which we all use quite a bit today. Our thoughts is a third that we've looked at, brain technology essentially, and using our brains and our brain waves to directly affect the computers that we're using. So imagine writing an email with your thoughts, or controlling a wheelchair by thinking about your motion as I do today, but instead of an up, down, left, right type joystick on a wheelchair, that patient simply using their thoughts to control the wheelchair. There's more advancements in the space than you might think, and we've looked at a few companies, invested in one that is doing this type of brain technology to control machines. Our portfolio company here is called Neurable. And here's an example of a use case for video gaming where she's using a virtual reality headset with this accessory essentially on the back of her head that captures the brain waves. And I've done it. It works. What their technology allows you to do is think something in a game, and it happens. So instead of using a controller, which sort of breaks the presence of the virtual environment, you can use your thoughts, just as we do in everyday life. They've got a cool demo where you're like tied with your hands behind your back, and you have to essentially use telekinesis to get yourself out of this room that you're locked in. And you have to move the key and, get it over to the door. And you're just thinking it as the game player. And these things are happening in the virtual experience that you're having. The New York Times actually wrote about this company a few weeks ago, and their conclusion was it works, because it does, as crazy as it sounds. But I think when we talk about more natural user interfaces for computing, what's more natural than our thoughts? It's more possible than you may think. And I think that these technologies in general are going to allow us to go places that we've never been before as individuals. And it's exciting to bring it back to Rick's commentary about why he does what he does and inspiring people to do things they never thought possible. I think these technologies are going to be part of the puzzle that allows us as entrepreneurs and business leaders to do new things and create new experiences. So it's really fun to think about every day when I go to work how these technologies are going to impact our lives. Hopefully this has been kind of a fun zip through 4 what I think will be very transformational technologies, and would love to hear if you guys agree, disagree, have any questions, want to go back to any information that I presented. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to hear them. Yeah.
So I've got 2 questions. But first is, what do you read? Like, what would you suggest we read? But the real question is, especially in light of recent news about Facebook and stuff like that, so, Dungeons and Dragons can be good, evil, or neutral, right? As an investor, as you're looking at this huge potential of these companies, especially with ASI or whatever that,
Yeah. Yep.
how are you looking at the company to ensure that they stay either neutral or good, or their technologies are used for neutral good
Yeah.
and not evil? Given even
Yeah.
the paucity of what Facebook has contributed.
First, if you're interested in this stuff, we try to write research that helps, I don't know, it's not 101 level, but 201, 301 level stuff on our research that on our website that unpacks a lot of these themes. And if you go to loopventures.com, you'll see a manifesto, and it's much more articulate and expansive view of what I've shared today. If you want to read something, I'd read that. But you're more so asking what types of inputs, right, I have and we use as a team, blogs and stuff like that, podcasts.
Yeah, I guess my real question is, when you're looking at making an investment in a company,
Oh.
you're looking at the management, right?
Yeah, that's your second question. So we have 19 questions that we use to make an investment decision, and the company must pass all 19 questions. Half of them are about the founder and the team. I think those are the questions that help us get to whether or not that person's going to leverage their contribution to the world for good or bad. We also have a question that we look at. It's simple. It's, does the world need this? And, they're all somewhat subjective, but it's a chance for us to sit back and say, does this make the world better or worse if this vision becomes a reality? So it's through those questions and time spent, and I think just understanding the team that we try to dig into that. Is there a question?
I might observe that one of the early slides said disruption to professional services, for example.
Yeah.
When I would submit as a CPA, I don't know if we got any attorneys in here, but there are societal issues in terms of whether our legal systems will be able to keep up. I think it's not disruptive to professional services. It's going to be complementary. We're going to be able to focus on creativity.
Right.
I'm not sure, given our political environment, that we've got the community governance in place that's going to be able to lay these laws out for us.
Yeah.
That might be as big a challenge as technology is going to have to fix.
Yeah.
It might bring it down because our leaders will not permit us to participate.
There's a slide that I took out of this that we've used in the past, and it's a lawmaker in Australia. I think we got an email from some guy in Australia saying, "Why did you use a picture of my governor as the example of this?" But he's just a big guy, and he's asleep at work. And it's emblematic, I guess, of the pace that politics can have versus the pace of technology. And we were writing about not AI and sort of the labor market, we were writing about autonomous vehicles and the types of rules and regulations that need to be put in place when these new types of cars are on the road. And there's panels and groups and consortiums in our government today that are trying to anticipate these problems. And just like what you're saying with the legal system, I think politics and our government will hold back technology that could otherwise exist because of its slow pace, no question. Yes. Right. Yeah, because of politics. Yep.
I have always submitted that mankind is unable to take advantage of the technology that's already available to them. And when you project this out,
Yep.
but it's a timing thing. It's
Right. Right.
But it's a timing thing, and then it gets to time value of money and where you invest.
Yep. Yeah. But I agree with you. I agree with you. The timing is key when you're, and the time frames and the duration to fruition. It's all.
But I guess if I was doing it, I would be doing it in small increments. You're probably
Yeah.
Your manifesto probably doesn't say you're out there hitting home run. You're not trying to time eventual winner. You want to be
Right.
on an increment.
Yeah, we're investing in the building blocks of these technologies for sure. Not the 30-year vision. It's a 10-year fund.
All right, so I'm going to jump in because we're a little after 1,
Yeah.
kind of stick to that timeline. Andrew will stay here at least for some period of time.
Yep.
If you want the slides, you can get them either from Andrew or myself.
Yep.
We have the room as long as anyone wants to stay. Feel free to stay. Feel free to go talk to Andrew and ask the question that I didn't hear today. And otherwise, thank you, Andrew, for being here.
Thank you all. This is fun.